out there, welcome and thanks for joining me. Today, I'm really happy to say that I'm here with Thomas Brush, my buddy who's an indie game developer. He's going to talk to me about a statement, or really, I think we're going to debate a statement that I think he's got no chance at winning. But it's going to be a fun, interesting discussion. So if you're interested in debates about game development, make sure that you hit thumbs up, subscribe, and all that. Today, Thomas, I hope you're ready. We're going to talk about the statement, AAA games or AAA developers make more money and are happier than indie devs. So you ready?
Oh, yeah.
All right, this should be a lot of fun. Before we get started, though, I wanted to mention that we've got 1 day left on the Ultimate Game Dev course bundle. That's all of my courses and Thomas's courses that teach you everything on how to make games, learning all of the code side, the art side, and from Thomas, the publishing and the entire indie side. So if you're interested in game development, now's the best time to get the best deal on pretty much everything that you need to learn about game development from both of us at one time, and start your journey now. So if you're interested in that, check it out down below. There's only a couple of seats left, and they'll probably be gone by the time this video ends. All right, Thomas, you ready to get started?
Oh, yeah. I'm excited about this one.
I hope you liked the statement. I tried to tweak it and make it as bad as possible. But AAA game devs make more money and are happier than indie devs. And I don't know, I think this might be a true statement just on the face of it. I know I've worked a little bit in both, and well, I don't know, where are you at on this? Do you agree, or are we just going to say, yeah, you're right, Jason, that's it?
No, you're not
better.
right, because it's not, there's no measurement, or like it's not defined, right? So like as a whole, like globally, all the employees of AAA, yes, there's more money there. But like if I picked randomly a successful AAA developer and a successful indie developer, the indie developer is the one with the yacht, you know, like the Toby Foxes of the world. In my case, you know, things have gone really well for me. Money's been great. So like over the course of my career, it's well over $1 million in gross income. And a lot of that, you know, we've just been able to save and put into savings. And so things have gone really, really well for me. But there's also other indie game developers out. To be honest, most indie game developers aren't making nearly that, right? So it really depends on, I guess, are we defining one person versus another person, or are we defining as a whole? I think as a whole, indie game developers are probably, like, I think of them as like, we've talked about this in our previous conversations, but like they're like the pirates of the world. They're like sailing open seas, and sometimes they strike it rich, and they're living like this wonderful lifestyle because they found the treasure, right? And then there's other indie developers that are sitting alone on an island, starving to death, right? There's a huge, I guess we could call it a wealth disparity in the indie game sphere. Whereas with AAA, I think you've got a salary, you know, you can make upwards of what? I mean, you tell me, like $300,000, $400,000 a year as just somebody who does a specific job. So what do you think?
So I think that you've kind of hit it right on that. On average, probably the median AAA developer is making more, but that's largely because the average or close to the median, probably more than half of the indie developers are making zero is the problem. Yeah. It's just pulling down that average. If you just look at the ones who've successfully finished, released, and launched their game, I think that you may end up seeing that indie devs are making more, right? The ones that have actually like done their whole game process, went through the entire cycle and released it. Their average or median may end up actually being higher. It's just that there's a lot at the zero, where in AAA you just can't be at zero, because if you're at zero, that means you're unemployed. you're on unemployment. You're not actually hired. So I think that's a very fair statement. If you're an indie dev making money, you're probably around the same, if not better, than a AAA dev.
And I feel bad that to address the I feel sorry to interrupt you, but I feel bad that addressing the answer, I immediately went to money. But it's when I think about indie game development in particular, the reason why you're not happy isn't because you're not like creatively free. Like, of course you're creatively free. Like, there's so much joy, but that joy is smothered and snuffed out by the stress, frankly, when you don't have money. And I've been there. It's not like I've always been like, just like right now, things are really going great and smooth. But there have been times in the past where like I had all the freedom in the world to make games, and I was married and I had bills to pay, I had a mortgage, I had a daughter on the way, and I was incredibly unhappy because the anxiety of the money situation. So that's just for clarity. That's why I immediately went to money. So
No, I totally understand. I think that was kind of the first part of it. And it does make a big difference. If you're not stable financially, it makes it very difficult to be successful and happy with the other things. You've got to kind of lock that down first. What was that like when you started doing indie dev stuff? Were you just kind of on a super tight budget, like strapped down, we're going to save money and not spend a penny until I start making cash here? Or were you just working a full-time job at the same time? Or
it's like again, it's back to that pirate metaphor. It's like you spend a year sailing to an island and there's nothing there. But you thought that there was money there, but there was nothing there. AKA, you spent a year working on a game and it only brought in 10 grand. And then another year, you do another project and it brings in $500,000. And you're like, so you're sometimes you're drinking from a fire hose, and then sometimes you're in the desert. And so that can be it can be super duper jarring and super confusing. And it's like, so if you're married, it's especially hard because your spouse, in my case, my spouse had to be okay with this lifestyle of saying, what is tomorrow's paycheck? And then all of a sudden you get $500,000 and it drops in your bank account. And then you have to live on that and then pay your team or so you have this mixture of like, there's money in my bank account, but it's not my bank account, it's my business's. And then you're with your spouse and your spouse is thinking that the money should be used for like, oh, well, let's go get a house. And it's like, well, no, that's for the game, So there's just this massive like relational confusion when the money isn't a strict paycheck. And that's why most people don't do entrepreneurship or creating digital products or games or running their own studios, because you have to figure out how that interacts with your family. I don't know. I mean, you probably understand what I'm saying. There's got to be a conversation of like, the business is different. It's separate. And it has to, and sometimes the business makes no money. Sometimes it makes a ton of money, and it's totally random. And my wife has been incredibly supportive because she's just sort of just accepted. And she grew up in this sort of lifestyle because her father owned a company as well. And so she understands that feeling of just the constant, I guess, quaking of the ground beneath our feet. And I've learned to just enjoy it. It's fun, honestly.
Yeah, I totally get that same feeling. My wife was the same way too. She was at first very scared and then super supportive afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, the first year or two is terrifying. It's like when you go down a roller coaster, you get that feeling in your stomach, right? And then it goes away, and then you learn to scream. If you can scream, that feeling goes away in your stomach. The same is true with game development. It's like just embrace it and scream it out and have fun, and you'll learn to enjoy it. It just takes a while.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about that enjoying part? So one of the parts of the statement here was that AAA devs make more money, which I think if we just look at stats, it's an easy win. But the second part was are happier than indie devs. Yeah. So how do you feel about that part? I mean, you've done a lot of indie dev stuff. You talked a little bit about the stress from the money side outside of needing money, assuming that everything's going okay-ish. How do you feel about the happiness?
It's insanely fun to make games. And I think most of your audience probably knows that. Anyone who's touched Unity understands like that it's like a godlike sensation of I'm creating a world. And not only am I like writing a book, like maybe Stephen King, Stephen King, he writes a book, but not only am I writing a story, I'm also, in control. I'm giving the player freedom to explore. So that's like game design, but then I'm rewarding the player and tricking the player, which is like psychology. And then you're creating, ambience and mood with color, and that's art, right? So there's just all these different aspects of making a game that an indie game developer has to do. And that's different from AAA, because I think, with AAA, from what I've learned from you, it's a very targeted job position that you will have in AAA. Whereas with indie game development, your job title is God of this world. That's your job title. And you've got to do all of the things that a God would do. And it's such a polarizing job, because on one end you're thrilled and it's like super addicting. It's really, really fun. And then on the other side of it, it's extremely stressful, because it's almost like a drug. So it's like you're getting the high from building a world, and then you have to come down off of that high when things aren't working and things are crumbling and crashing, and they always do. Or when it's 5 o'clock and you have kids and you have a family, and it's 5 p.m. and you got to get off work, and the whole game breaks. And then you have to somehow get out of that mindset, that creative architectural mindset, and go spend time with your family. For me, that's been probably the greatest challenge out of all of this. And the challenge is I enjoy it so much that it's hard to enjoy regular life, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's like that. Like I mentioned earlier, friends that work like 60, 80 hours because they love what they're doing. Right? They have too much fun with it. But I was thinking on the AAA side of that, I don't know. Initially I was thinking maybe indie devs are happier and have more fun. But on the AAA side, like depending on what it is you're doing, you get to kind of have just fun and positivity most of the time, because most of your feedback is coming from other developers who are working on the project, and you're usually, at least as a programmer, you're providing something for them. So you're giving the designers or the artists the ability to put together the things that they wanted to do. And they're always super happy. They're always super happy and cheery about it, and thankful and excited, and you get to see them use it. So I always had a lot of fun with that. I guess if you're working as an indie dev and you're getting a lot of that feedback somewhere else, possibly be fun. But I do see.
I don't get a lot of feedback. I'll be honest, because I get it from my audience. But the difficulty with that, and this, is like not all comments are created equul. There's some people out there who are just jerks, So the feedback I take is from
down below right now.
The feedback I take from my indie game projects is I'll mainly take it from my tiny team of like part-time contract workers and one full-time artist. But that's what makes it so exciting and also so depressing at the same time. And it's really hard for me to say that indie developers are happier, because they're polarized. It's like super happy and then the next day super depressed, because you don't have the salve of a team like you're talking about. Like a team comes in and we all work together and we all, pat each other on the back and help each other out. Whereas when you have a tiny little 2-man team, it can be so dark one day and then so exciting another day because of all the power that you have. So you can really let yourself down, or you can make yourself feel super excited all in the course of 2 days.
Yeah, that's a wild swing. Okay, for everybody that's watching, just drop a comment and let me know, or let us both know which one you think is happier, AAA or indie devs, because now I'm curious. I'm heavily leaning towards AAA devs now. Mostly,
I know this is a debate, but I kind of agree with you.
All of the sad days as an indie dev, those don't come that often as a AAA dev. Like, the sad day was like, somebody took all the good donuts that came in today. like, oh no, the fridge is out of rock stars. Like,
imagine, there's so many indie developers out there. Imagine how scary it is to spend 2 years on a project you don't know is going to make a dime, you know? Whereas with AAA studios, oftentimes the funding is already there. There's plenty of money in the bank. It's not always the case, right? There's plenty of studios that go down. But also they have IPs. So for example, like Call of Duty, it's like they can invest $100 million in the next Call of Duty because they've got the IP, you know? And they know they're going to make their money back. So that's not really a gamble, but it is a gamble for me to go, you know what? I really want to make a game about a minister who goes to hell, and I'm going to spend 5 years on that game, and it's going to be an artsy-fartsy 2D platformer, and I'm going to just pray that it makes $500,000, and I can make my money back, you know?
Yeah. It's definitely a lot riskier.
Yeah, it is, yeah. But that can lead to joy, can it? Because for me, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that feeling. I wouldn't have it any other way.
I get that high.
Yep.
I remember releasing the first game I launched out to Steam and seeing all of a sudden like a couple $1,000s in sales in the first few hours. I was like, oh wow, this is amazing! Like this is super cool. Yeah, like any other Steam release, eventually it dropped down. And I was like, oh, I went back to that sad point. Like oh, $10. Like oh, but yeah. Yeah. Still, I totally feel you with the swing. So there were a lot of questions that came in that people wanted to ask of you or wanted me to ask you, and I wanted to just kind of see if we could go through as many of them as possible and get some answers for people that are kind of curious about indie dev. The first one, I think we've kind of loosely talked about what the upsides and downsides are for working in an indie studio, but I'm more interested in what the day-to-day life of the indie dev is. But what is it like? So like as a AAA dev, you go into the office, you open up whatever it was you were working on yesterday, and you continue working on that. Whenever that's done, you look at the next thing that's on your list on your Trello board or whatever it is that you're using, and you do that. And then once a week or twice every other week, you go in and talk to the developers and figure out what it is you're going to be doing for the next 2 weeks. Very simple, very standardized. Now, every now and then there's a fire and you're going to fix something. Probably once a week, you get distracted. What about as an indie dev, though? Because it's got to be, I mean, it's drastically different, right?
Yeah, it's like a roller coaster. And like I said, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's the way my personality is. And I think this is true of probably like the Elon Musks of the world. It's like everyone's along for the ride with Elon, and he's up, down, in circles all over the place like crazy, right? And I'm not saying I'm Elon Musk, but I'm saying an entrepreneur is typically somebody who's like kind of bouncing around with ideas, right? And there's just a lot of different opportunities. Like an entrepreneur can see ideas. So a digital entrepreneur, somebody who makes games, they can see ideas and opportunities where no one else can. And that's what makes them almost acting like a squirrel, like looking for opportunities all over the place. And they seem spazzy, and they probably are spazzy. But in the long term, their shotgun approach is suddenly hitting the bullseye every quarter, right? And so for me, like my day-to-day is probably going to look, I can't speak for any of the indie developers because I don't know what their day-to-day is. But mine is, it seems spazzy. So like my day-to-day is always different, and then my quarter-to-quarter is always different. So for example, like in the holidays, during the holidays, my indie developer roles are completely different than Q1 of the year or Q2. Because Q4 during the holidays is I focus on online school stuff and resources, right? So you and I, we have this bundle together. So we do sale events for that, or I do sale events for Black Friday for my online course. And then I take some of the revenue that comes in, and then I pour that into the next game in like Q1 or Q2, right? And so Q4 is doing videos and doing YouTube and doing marketing and doing email and all this stuff, and really focusing on the business admin side of my studio. And then Q1, Q2, it's just sort of get in a bunker and make a game, right?
Can you talk more about what that looks like?
Most people are. Go ahead.
I think, can you talk a little bit more about what those 2 quarters look like? Like what do you
Yes.
do? Do you just come in like every morning and start writing code, or do you
Mhm.
like build out a big plan and you just start picking things off, or
Yeah. So Q1, Q2, when I'm actually making a game, um, it's not that complicated. It's get out of bed at 7:50 a.m. in the morning. I typically don't get ready for the day. I'll brush my teeth, but that's about it. I'll grab a cup of coffee, and then I'll give my kids a kiss, and then I'll go upstairs, and I will just get to work. So I'll open up Airtable, not Airtable. We use Airtable, but ClickUp.com, and it's kind of like Monday.com, but ClickUp is what me and my team member Felipe use to just set up our tasks for a game. And then we just have a monthly task list of what we want to get done by the end of the month. And what's crazy is you could slam way more than you thought you could get done into that month. And when you do that, you're sort of giving yourself a target, and you're much more likely going to hit that target. So I open up ClickUp, and then I'll just knock out all the things on the list. And for me and Felipe, who's my 3D artist, but he does a lot more than that. We just do a lot of different things. So like there's a million hats that I wear, and there's a lot of hats that Felipe wears as well. And so I'll do code for an hour, and then I'll do art for an hour, and then I'll do admin stuff or tax stuff for another hour, and then I'll do some marketing or social media stuff for an hour. So every hour is completely different. I can't think of a single day where I only focused on one thing. I mean, maybe there was like 3 days this year where it was just, I'm just going to work on the code. It's always something random and different. And that's just because my personality, I like that. So I'm not saying all indie developers are that way. And in fact, it's probably something that I struggle with. It's a struggle, but I'm constantly ping-ponging around at all these different things. But if you zoom out, you see this structure being built slowly. So I guess I'm just lucky that despite being like ping-ponging around at all these different tasks, I'm lucky that I'm able to visualize what the game is, and it does eventually get done. It's just, if anyone was working with me, most people would be frustrated with me. Felipe sometimes gets frustrated, but he's a good team member. But most people would be like, "What are you doing?" But it eventually does get made. It's just a kind of a ping pong throughout the day of all these different things I do, and every day is that way, 8 to 5, ping ponging around in all the different aspects of making a game, and I'll do all of the things, right? So yeah.
right? So do you intentionally do you block it out in hours each day, or do you just it just naturally happens that way? You're like, it's been about an hour, I'm ready to move on to the next thing, or as soon as this thing's done, I'm moving on to the next one. You just kind of go down the list and you just pick the one you want to do next, or they're like already
what I
priority?
want to do, I'll do. Yeah. It's kind of like walking into the gym and like going to the smoothie bar, and then you go to the sauna, and then you go and you hang out with your friend, and then you're like, okay, I should probably run 2 miles. And then you go run 2 miles, and then you say, I should probably go do, work on my abs. And so a lot of times the things you don't want to do end up getting pushed to the end of the day, which is something I need to work on, because that's what causes me to work on stuff I hate at 5 p.m. And then I get frustrated, and then I go downstairs and hang out with my kids, and I'm frustrated. So I probably need to invert it and work on the dumb stuff, or like the stuff I hate first. But typically it's just based on like what I want to do, right? So it's a very kind of selfish way to work.
It works, right? It's whatever you can be motivated for. I do somewhat similar. I build out a list of stuff I want to do for the day, and then I'll just go with like something, usually 1 or 2 things that I can knock out really quickly, and then I'll try to get on to something that's more of a pain.
Right.
So. Nice. Well, that's interesting. It sounds like it's very, very opposite though, because like I said, AAA, I mean, sometimes you're working on multiple things a day, but that's because they're little things. Like maybe you're going through 15 tickets, but it's because they're easy and you're able to knock them out in 10 minutes because they're little things. But most of the time you're working on something for a day or two, or up to a week on average.
And I think that has a lot to do with just social accountability. Like if I have a team, even if I have a team member, like I've had interns in the past, where I won't behave in a squirrel-like manner, because the intern is sitting next to me. And I don't want to bring them along for this crazy ride. So I'll be like, okay, no, and I'll be a lot more structured with just an intern with me, right? So I think the same is true with AAA. When you've got a team that's relying on you, you don't want to rock the boat. And so I think you'll behave.
And they're waiting for something. Usually it's like a deliverable.
Right.
I got to get this code in so that this art can be used, and then this designer can do it. And if I do 3 other things before that, then the artist and designer's time is just wasted waiting for me to do other things that weren't.
And then they hate you, and then they tell everybody else in the office, right? I don't know.
They might. Come after you with a sword.
Yeah.
So let's go through a couple more of these questions because there were a lot of them. The next one was pretty simple. How many small games would you build before going for a big one? So this in an indie context, so you're building little games. And can you also maybe define what you'd consider a small game versus a big one?
Yeah, I would say a small game is 10 to 15 minutes of gameplay. I know that's difficult to define because there's a lot of games that are like sandbox games. They could be like, you could play them all day. But when I'm thinking of just like small little linear games, something like 10 to 15 minutes, I would say do 2 or 3, and they will be crappy, and you need to be okay with them being crappy. If they're not crappy, you're lying to yourself, because the maybe you disagree with me, but I think the rate at which you grow as a game developer is logarithmic, as opposed to exponential. So like the same is true with weight training. Like with weight training, if you hit the gym and you have no muscle mass, your body throws it on so fast. I think the same is true with game development. When you start making games, your skill just wildly increases, but there gets this point where you're slow. You've hit your stride. It's kind of like filmmakers as well. Like Tim Burton, he's just making Tim Burton movies. Like Spielberg, it's just the same thing over and over again. That you hit your stride, and so that's kind of how it was for me. My point in saying all that is that you release a game here, right here, and then 2 months later you release another game. Well, it's going to be this much better, right? So you're going to look back on this game and it has to be crap. It's like a law. And then the next one is a little bit better, but not as much of a gap, right? And so my theory is 3 or 4 games down the road, like two crappy games or 3 crappy games down the road, you're going to have something that is so much better than your first game, and you got to be okay with that. So for those of you who are scared to release a game, I would say you're kidding yourself. What I mean is you're afraid of failure. Well, you have to fail. You have to fail to be able to release your big game. So you got to fail 2 or 3 times first before you know how to do a big one. Yeah.
And I would also put on there on those small ones. Don't try to don't waste a lot of time trying to make money on them because they're not going to make money.
No.
Don't spend an extra year monetizing them or any other random stuff. Focus on the game, make it quick, and like you said, 10 to 15 minutes of gameplay, and that's it. Like just do that multiple times first before you start trying to get into I need to figure out how to make this into a profitable business.
Well, I will say, would I rather have $15 or an email address? That's a really good question for you, Jason. Would you rather have $15 or an email address? What would you rather have?
Ooh, that's a lot. If you said $3, I would say the email address. At 15, it's kind of
Yeah. So my point in saying that is just a question to plant in your audience's mind, which is it possible that you can monetize your game, but for the future? So capture email addresses on social media. Say, hey guys, I have a free game. Send them to a squeeze page and then get an email address in exchange for the free game, right? What that means is over the course of 2 years of making crappy games, you now have a list of 20,000 people who like your games. And then when you have that big game, you have a wish list of 20,000 people ready to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think 2 to 3 seems like a good number. So let's go on to another question. What's a roadmap for non-game developers to switch into game dev, both solo or part-time? So these are people that are doing enterprise stuff or e-commerce, and they want to take into account their non-game dev experience. So they've got some game development experience outside, some coding experience inside, and they want to know what a hiring manager would be looking for. And if it's possible to just talk about this story. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't have any experience with that. You probably do.
I saw this one was for you, but it was kind of
Yeah.
in my experience. I wanted to kind of answer it and then rephrase it a little bit for you. So if you're trying to get into game dev like at a AAA or like a smaller studio and you're doing this, you really have to focus on your coding skills or the relevant things that you're going to bring. Either you're a good artist or you're a good programmer. That's all they're probably going to care about. They're not going to care too much about your design skills because they don't really relate. So you want to focus on the programming side of it and put forward your actual projects that you're working on so that they know that you can actually see what you're working on. But I was curious on your view, though, in relation to this question, on doing non-game contract work as an indie studio. So if you're, indie game studios, a lot of time they'll do some interactive displays or visual things that pay relatively well for a small amount of work as a side gig. I know a couple guys with indie studios that do something similar to that, or sometimes they'll just focus 100% on contract work in between games. Is that something that you've done or have any thoughts on or seen other people do?
The only thing I would consider, I've always turned it down. Like that's the thing is like if I ever had like an opportunity, I just wouldn't take it because I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying don't take it. I think people should take it for sure. It's just for me, I could like in my head, I knew generally how much my game was going to make. It was going to be, it was $300,000 plus. That was in my head. That was always how much my game was going to make. So I would always go, okay, is working on this side gig more valuable monetarily, just monetarily speaking, than the game I'm working on? And so I would never take the projects. And there was just a few. It wasn't a ton. But that's not the case necessarily for the majority of your listeners or people watching. So I don't really have experience in doing that.
But you did see the opportunities kind of present themselves, right?
It's small, man. Like it wasn't a lot. Honestly, it wasn't a lot. That's something I don't fully understand is the freelance world. Something that I will say is super valuable as a career path is consultation. I would say that's probably honestly, like I'm probably going to start doing that next year is just start doing consultation and coaching for game projects. Because like the truth is, how valuable is it for an art director to come in and go, your UI sucks, give me an hour and I'll make it look 10 times better. But I'm going to charge a flat rate of $5,000, you know? And so there's if you're really, really talented in a specific field, consultation, for me, maybe I'm just super niche and because I do have a YouTube channel, so I can do that because I have, hundreds of thousands of individuals who want to make games and, they would probably love to get some valuable advice. But in the freelance world, no, I haven't really been involved.
Okay, that's interesting. I would have assumed that you'd done more, but it sounded like you're already making money on the on the game. Most of the time, the developers that I've seen doing it are kind of either they're just starting out and they haven't made any money yet, and they're just trying to kind of supplement their income, or they're like I said, in between projects. A lot of time they built a game, they released it, it's done. They're not sure what they're going to do yet. They start taking on some contracts. And then sometimes those contracts end up being crazy things. Like
I think that's great.
The displays at the Super Bowl, like the big giant pop-up on the wall.
I've had friends who take on government work, and that pays very well too.
Oh, yeah. A lot of that's in Unity too.
Oh yeah, no. And what's crazy is I got to you met John, the CEO of Unity, right? You did an interview with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, just talking with him, I got to talk with him over the last week in San Francisco. I got to go to the Unity headquarters or whatever and talk to John, and I just learned so much that like Unity is it's available for so many other fields, right? So it's not just game development; it's architecture, it's medical, right? There's just so many amazing opportunities available. And I think a lot of game developers are like, oh no, they're not focused on game developers anymore. They want to do all this other stuff. And I'm thinking, no, it just means the opportunities are 3 or 4 times as prevalent, because now you can do freelance work for, a medical supply company, right? Or the government.
Yeah, no, I know some game developers who recently just got hired at multi-6-figure salaries to work on some other I don't know how much I can talk about, some other non-game stuff
that's awesome,
semi-related in Unity, and it's all just it all feels relatively simple compared to game development, but it's solving real world problems, and I think it's definitely worth looking into.
My theory is the word game, I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say with this, but I just feel like the word game is going to slowly become irrelevant. And it's not because I'm fully bought into the metaverse, but to be completely honest, I'm kind of slowly buying into the fact that this is going to be real. And what I mean is, like, games have become, they're like social organisms as opposed to just a linear experience. And so they're more than games. And so the concept of a game is, it's spreading just to be a digital product, right? It's a digital organism that you've created. And I think it's important for game developers who want to make money to realize that you don't just have to think of your career as making linear games like it was in 2010. Instead, be thinking of what kind of digital thing that can I make with Unity that's fun to make, and it's exciting and it's creative, but it brings in income. That's the real question, especially as I get older, because I love to look for ways to make money, especially that I have a family. And now I'm like, what other digital stuff can I make besides a game,
Yeah, it's actually kind of exciting. I've got a ridiculous amount of just random digital products out there that I want to develop for that all work with Unity. I'll have to show you later.
I'd love to see
off camera. But one of the things I was curious about, you're talking about the metaverse stuff. Did you grab one of the Quest Pros yet? Have you dug into that? Is that something that you're into, or are you waiting until you can jack in, or you're just waiting to get a Quest 2 later?
Well, I'll tell you, like, from a philosophical perspective, that stuff freaks me the hell out. Just because I'm afraid I'll get addicted. It's the reason I don't download TikTok. I'm scared I'll like it more than my real life. So I don't touch it. Have you?
I just don't do it. I don't want people to think I'm a teenage girl. or the government of China spying on me. Or
you don't want that either.
And then again, I never use any social media. I have an Instagram, and I have like 6 posts on it. I always forget that it exists. So I really
don't forget you're on YouTube.
That's the only one I remember. YouTube and the Facebook group. Those 2 I remember. Everything else, I feel like I'm
yeah.
Like,
I think my big issue with VR right now is, like, it's not accessible. It's too expensive. It's too heavy. It makes me nauseous. Motion sickness, and it just, I'm not saying it's not going to be the future. I think it's 100% the future. It's going to be scary how, my prediction is it's going to be terrifying how much we love it. And Facebook's stock is collapsing, but I think they know exactly what they're doing. It's these companies, they lose money to make money. And I think they're going to hit the jackpot, and I don't know if I want to participate in that. because it's that. I
It
just
is
think
a
it's
good way to
that
make
weird.
money for those developers that want to get out there. It's
I know.
definitely a great opportunity for indies, I think, getting into
I
VR,
know.
AR, any of those
I
new
know.
platforms.
I'll probably
So,
end
I
up
mean,
making some sleazy VR game that makes me $10 million. That's probably what I'm going to feel terrible about it, but it's probably going to happen. And I'll look back on this video and say, "How did I sell out so fast?" But
it's okay. You
yeah, I
can
mean,
open
the
up your bank
opportunities
account
are they're
balance.
they're going to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think people should look into it. I actually was trying to grab a Quest 2. I tried to order it multiple times, and my order kept getting rejected. So I had to figure that
Yeah.
out and eventually get one to play with it. I really liked or not the Quest, the Pro. I liked the Quest 2. I made a whole bunch of VR stuff before, but until I moved into this new office, I had run out of space. So I'd basically be standing there with the headset on, unable to move without knocking something off of one of my walls or one of my random way too many pieces of decor over. So now that I've got space, I want to kind of dive back in and start playing with it and see what.
If you, this is a fun question for you. I know we're getting close to time here, but I wanted to ask you this. If somebody snapped their fingers and you were in a VR world that had everything that you wanted and you were everything you wanted to be, and your family was there, you had your family, but the world was just better and all the sensations were better and life was just better and there was no distinction between the real world and that digital world, would you accept it? Would you accept the offer?
Half the time I worry that I already did and that I'm stuck in it right now and I just don't know.
You have a good life then. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's happy. It's good now. So I always just worry like, maybe one day I'm going to wake up like a Neo and be like, what the fuck is this? Like, oh, shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't take it.
I wouldn't take it now, but maybe if I was in Neo's world, I would.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Matrix, yeah, like running from robots all day. I'd be like, yeah, pop me back in there. I'm gonna go call Thomas.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss. That's the quote from Matrix with the guy's eating the steak and he says, "Ignorance is bliss." It's it's true. It's true, but I couldn't take it. I really couldn't. There's just something that feels super freaky about the rate at which the digital and virtual worlds are becoming so addicting. Like I told myself I was not going to install Instagram because I deleted it and I was fasting from Instagram for like 3 months and I was like the happiest I ever was. And then I downloaded it just to check a post and then like instantly I'm like, I got to get my fix every like hour,
Oh, wow.
So that stuff freaks me out. Like, I don't like how addicting it is. So
that was Clash of Clans for me. I just uninstalled it and like, done. Yeah, social media stuff has never really got me that much. I think probably just because I don't have any friends. but yeah, the little mobile games, I pretty much just try to refuse installing any mobile games unless it's something that somebody I know made and I'm testing it out. Because otherwise I know I could sit there just for hours, get distracted and not realize like, the hell am I doing? Like I could have done so much more. Instead, I have purple walls instead of silver ones. Oh, well, this has been really great talking to you, Thomas. I had a lot of fun, and I hope we can do this again sometime because there's I think a lot to talk about. And I think the statement at the beginning was obviously true, but I'll let everybody else vote in the comments. Whoever said AAA make more money and are happier than indie devs. I mean, I think we might loosely disagree on the happier part.
Well, I will disagree from a personal perspective, which is I'm probably happier than most AAAs because I am the god of my games. It's so fun, and it matches my personality. I just love my life.
Necessarily makes you happy.
Yeah.
Although it probably makes you happier than a lot of jobs because I feel like being a game dev, and this is true for AAA and indie devs, it's not one of those jobs that you just kind of like fall into usually. It's not one of those jobs like, oh yeah, well they were hiring down the street, so this is where I worked my entire life. It's one of those things that like you wanted to do it, you seek it out, and you kind of have to pursue it. It's not something that you stumble into, unlike a lot of careers.
Right. The question kind of implies that being happy is what people want. And I don't want to get too philosophical here, but I don't even know if I like happiness. I think I'd rather have purpose. So like for me, I just feel really good when I have a purpose and like I'm being utilized,
Getting stuff
which
done.
probably leads to happiness. But I would rather be stressed out and doing what I do than be happy.
I think you have to be doing what you like to do though, and getting something accomplished to be happy. Because if you're in one of those jobs, AAA or even like enterprise stuff or anything, and you're not doing anything, you're just kind of sitting around, not being utilized, like wasting most of your day sitting in meetings and stuff, you will quickly become an unhappy developer and leave that place and
Yeah.
or stand around bitching about the place constantly. I've seen it happen more than once. Like, you got to actually give people stuff to do that's interesting and fun and at or just above their skill level, so they can kind of grow and exceed to it. So
Yeah.
it's a important thing to do. Well, anyway, thanks again for talking to us. I had a lot of fun. I always have fun talking to you, though. And also, for everybody that's watching, make sure that you go check out that Ultimate Game Dev bundle. It's still available for one day. If there's still seats left, you can click the link in the description to go check it out. It's got all of our stuff, plus a bunch of cool free bonuses, Unity license, Odin license, a bunch of assets, and all kinds of other great stuff. Definitely worth checking out. So thanks again. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and hit the notification button. Bye.